First and Now is the official BC Lions podcast inside of 1 week to actual football, on the field, football, organized, practice, all street legal, Kamloops, Matt Baker, mountains. I'm going to go hiking again.
We'll get into that.
We'll get into that. Matt Baker alongside Nick Kowalski. And if there's a little bit of bounce in our step here as you're listening or watching this, we're excited. In fact, if you're watching us, for those listening, we apologize, but head to our YouTube channel. You got the new polo here.
Yeah, orange sleeve.
I should have worn that one. I got that one, yeah. We both got that one yesterday.
Little monogram logo action on it for those.
Love the BC logo. And the orange, this different. I like that. The orange stripes.
I'm just happy it's more black than not because it gets, when we're out in Toronto, Calgary, in the open sun there, it gets hot. So I like the black.
Anyone, exactly. Anyone coming up to Kamloops for FanFest, anyone who's not can still shop online, of course, online store. We have this is always like getting the training camp shirt. It's gray this year. It was black last year. I like the logo. No, I like it.
The logo's fire. So like we got Janelle and Carter on the case. They always bring the heat. So
it's comfortable, light fit. You mentioned being outside when it's 28 degrees in the morning and getting hotter. Got to shout out our training camp sponsors on the back. That's good. That's good audio, I know.
Yeah, turning around from the mic, yeah.
There's a full fashion show coming later.
And then the last accessory going on right now is this playoff beard is still intact.
Oh, yes.
Because a certain someone on Tuesday night got extended the series to Game 6. We haven't even recorded since the chaos started with Vancouver and Nashville.
Yeah, we're doing after this, we're every week, right?
Yeah, we're going back to weekly after this, too.
And we have a special episode next week, which we'll discuss later with our friends at World Vision. But yeah, so 2 weeks ago, we didn't even know the matchup was official yet. So in the meantime, since that last recording, the Canucks and Nashville drew each other officially. We decided on a whim just to say, let's go. Game, you've never been to a playoff game before.
Nope, had to do it.
So we bought tickets to game 1 of the series on the Sunday before last. It was a great night. Not as much for you because the Predators, like they've done a couple times now in the series, losing a third period lead, but the Canucks returned the favor in Game 5. How did you like, other than the result, you got to see a playoff game. How'd you like that?
It was electric, and the Canucks obviously bringing back the Streets Have No Name intro. It was worth every penny I think we spent. Yeah, it was a lot of harassment, obviously, because I was wearing a yellow jersey for those who saw on social media. But I mean, I can take it. As long as it's verbal and there's no physical or anything involved in that, I think it's all in good fun and whatever. But it was a blast, I thought. And
yeah.
It's a Stanley Cup playoffs. It's been on my TV nonstop since they started, and I'm loving it.
You even did an interview with Sportsnet Radio.
Yeah, I think for their Instagram thing. So I was, when I say I was on an island at that arena, I felt like I was maybe like an Alouettes fan in BC.
I think we saw 2 other Predators jerseys the whole night.
And they were Sissons because he's from North Vancouver.
Right.
So it's probably his buddies or his family. So yeah, the Yellows were on an island in that arena.
You mentioned Colton Sissons. If not for him, Nashville would be up 3-2 in the series. Remember that empty net post, but whatever.
I'm still not over it.
Hey, again, we're recording this the day before Game 6, but by the time you're listening to this, we could be talking about Game 7. We could be talking about the Canucks playing the Oilers in round 2, and boy, oh boy, wouldn't that be outstanding. That would give us some evening TV viewing once we do get to Kamloops. But we are here to talk Lions football. Along with the Stanley Cup playoffs, this week has been jacked up. We're going to recap the draft. BC Lions coming away with 8 new Canadian prospects. You're going to hear from one of them on this episode, first-round pick George Una. But we kind of had a feeling this might be coming down for a couple of weeks or so, and bear with us. It was made official middle of the week. Defensive lineman Christian Covington, the pride of Vancouver College, 2015 draft pick of the BC Lions, over 100 games in the NFL under his belt. He's coming home. Christian Covington will be a member of the BC Lions in 2024, and we spoke with him via Zoom conference earlier today. Head to our YouTube or website or social channels. You hear it in his voice how jacked up he is. Big signing for the BC Lions on the eve of camp.
Big signing and a big guy too. If you're unfamiliar with Christian Covington, do yourself a favor right now. Go to Google, type in his name, go to the images, and look at how big this guy is on the football field, and imagining being an offensive lineman having to block this guy, because he is a force out there. It's why he got those 100 games in the NFL. It's why he's still motivated right now. He didn't mention that he is a little lighter than his NFL days, but that usually translates well to the CFL game, right? And like you said, it's been a process, and it's a big signing. This is a big deal for those who are unaware. It's a big deal that Christian Covington is a BC Lion.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about how it came about. One of our friends and loyal listeners, Dave Wardle, on the app formerly known as Twitter, was looking for some insight to how it happened, and here's how it happened. He reached out to us, but we should preface it by saying that Neil McAvoy, Ryan Rigmaiden especially, they've known this player for a long time. He's been a Lions property for nearly a decade. So the lines of communication weren't exactly shut off, but Christian himself actually reached out to us via DM wanting to get in touch with the guys to talk about coming home. So that just shows you where his focus is at.
And Neil McAvoy mentioned today, too, that he was a part of that draft room back in 2015 with Wally Buono, Jeff Tedford in the room. And Neil has since spoken with Wally, he mentioned today, too, and approving that move, or I guess maybe even celebrating the fact that it all worked out. And Neil was joking with the media today that this is the plan they had all along.
Yeah. So that's exciting. And again, talking to him in his media conference, he says he's in the best shape of his life. That's one of those cliches that gets said by guys who are a little older. But this player's only 30 years old, Nick.
Look at him, too.
And he's a trim 280. He's going to be explosive. He talked about how Rigmaiden and Neil told him about the shorter play clock. You have to play fast. And he zeroed in on that clearly in his training.
Yeah, and he's going to be, we've seen the past 2 seasons with John Bowman as a D-line coach, they'll dress 9-10 defensive linemen and they'll play 9-10 defensive linemen too. So it's easy to stay fresh in this rotation, and that's paid dividends. The Lions have been near the top of the league in sacks these past 2 seasons, I think kind of sneakily, right? You think of all the production from Matthew Betts, but there's guys like Sione getting 8. Tebow's got a few over the past couple of years. Josh Banks is always good for a couple, and then, you rotate these guys in, it gets pretty scary.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. High motor, and you just look at the personnel there, and unfortunately it's meant we've had to say goodbye to a loyal soldier for a long time, David Menard, among those cut today transactions at bclions.com. But that's just the nature of the business. There is a salary cap. There is a budget they have to stay to adhere to stay within those boundaries. But very excited to see what Christian brings. The veteran leadership as well. Not every day you get a guy with over 100 NFL games under his belt.
Well, I think, I immediately go to Francis Bemi with that aspect too, right? You think a guy like Francis Bemi can't learn from an NFL vet like Christian Covington, so that's definitely something I want to keep an eye out for throughout the regular season here.
We'll get JC Abbott's thoughts on Covington and the draft picks as well. JC from 3 Down Nation going to be making his debut, and we on the topic of transactions.
Breaking news.
Yes, we're going to break news to our listeners here. Well, it's out there. We've put it out there as we've been recording. Speaking of veteran experience, this one kind of a pleasant surprise. A name that may not resonate right away, but bear with us. Kyle Nelson, a long snapper. He'll play as a national because of his roots to the province of Alberta. But Kyle suited up with the San Francisco 49ers for 7 years, 89 games with the Niners, including a Super Bowl appearance against Kansas City 4 years ago. Had a cup of coffee with the Chargers, your Indianapolis Colts for a season. He got into one game. He was with Washington. He was with the Seattle Seahawks in training camp the year that they ended up winning the Super Bowl in 2013. He went to San Francisco after that for a third stint. So this is a player who bounced around the NFL quite a bit. But he found a home with the 49ers. He's been out of football for the most part. But he's going to come in and bring some experience and some leadership. And the name Nelson, he is the son of longtime CFL assistant coach Mark Nelson. Mark, of course, was with us in training camp 2 years ago as a guest coach, was with Coach Rick in Ottawa. They won a Grey Cup together in 2016. Mark has been in Edmonton, San Antonio, Toronto, and Kyle's grandfather, Mark's father, Roger, played 13 seasons with Edmonton in the 50s and 60s, a member of the Wall of Honor. So Kyle Nelson, an NFL veteran as well, but some CFL roots there with his father and grandfather, and I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, football runs in the bloodline, that's for sure, describing all of that. But this is something you got to look out for in training camp, how Kyle Nelson's going to fit into this team, how his camp's going to go. So I know you'll be doing your training camp reports. I'll be behind the camera filming them for you. But that's something that we'll definitely touch on as camp goes in Kamloops, and excited to see that too, and how Kyle fits into this club.
Try and, once I get to know him a bit, maybe get his breakdown on the first Super Bowl loss against Kansas City. And Mark, his dad, Mark, I asked Mark about that in Kamloops 2 years ago, and he actually had a great story. I think you were there at the dinner table when we were talking about this. So remember, the Niners intercepted Mahomes twice in the second half. They were up by 10 points. And there's a famous photo of them, I think it was after the Tarvarius Moore interception in the fourth quarter, where they intercept the ball and the entire defense, Richard Sherman, Nick Bosa, all those guys, they run all the way to the opposite end zone and celebrate. And we all know what happened in the world about a month or so ago in 2020 with the pandemic. And one of the funny memes I came across at that time said, the world went to hell after this photo was taken because, of course, the Chiefs came back and we in the world were locked down, shut down at home. But Mark Nelson says if you look at that photo very, very closely, I couldn't find this. My eyesight 2020, maybe not anymore. If you look closely in the far corner, there's a Canadian flag in the stands. He's like, that's me. So his father, Mark, went to that Super Bowl with a Canadian flag. I don't think I was able to spot it after he told me, but
that's a good story. I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, and Mark's no doubt got plenty of football stories, and as does Kyle, given his tour of duty down south. So plenty of transactions. That's be the photo you're looking at right there. I couldn't find it. That's too...
Just some great podcasting going on.
Yeah, great visuals and everything. So
I'm sure it's there.
Well, we believe him. We'll take him at his word. So there you go, Kyle Nelson. And before we get JC Abbott in here and do a thorough breakdown of the Canadian draft, what stood out to you as far as our draft picks?
Well, the team definitely, George Una was their guy. And they went and got their guy in the first round. It addresses the offensive line, obviously, as Una being a first-team All-Star as a senior in the OUA at University of Windsor. And then it was kind of out there that one of these top three picks in the first two rounds was going to be a futurist pick, and they obviously go with Theo Benedict as pick 15 in the second round too, right? So that's someone who was signed as a UDFA by the Chicago Bears. It's exciting though to see. We're going to talk to Una in a bit here, get his thoughts on coming out west, and seeing all these other prospects come out to Kamloops next week.
Yeah, and having that bonus pick in the second round for the most national snaps, that's in theory why you reach a little bit for Theo Benedict. Rick Campbell told us that at the end of the night. And I know there was some comments on the TSN broadcast and with JC himself, everyone doing a great job in their coverage. And I think that may have been a forgotten element. If it wasn't for that extra pick, maybe you don't go for him there, or maybe you still do, or you hope he's around in round number 3. The end of the first round, of course, Theo Johnson, one Canadian, another one who was selected in the NFL draft by the New York Giants, was it? Tight end out of Penn State. Addressed the defensive backfield, Dawson Marchant, Northwest Oklahoma State, and Christophe Bayou out of Laval. And I think there's some interesting connections between our second-round pick, Ezekiel Tiede, the receiver out of Concordia, and Laval. They played each other, I believe, ahead of the Vanier Cup last year. So, yeah, it's you never truly know until these guys get into camp, get into the real live action, and for those that stick around for main camp, that's when it really, really is a measuring stick, right? it's easy for rookies to look good against other rookies, and you try not to jump to conclusions in first-year player camp, which will be on the field at Thompson Rivers University as of Wednesday afternoon. So our guys are excited. Rob Ralph said, bclions.com, you can go back and read the draft preview. It's a little dated now, but he said this was the best crop he'd seen in 7 to 10 years, Nick. And I think that's evident in the type of athletes we've got coming in.
100%. In these last 2 seasons that I've been here, I've learned to not count any single draft pick out, right? You got later round guys like Jack Hinsberger last year, Joshua Archibald and Adrian Green, Riley Pickett, all making different contributions, whether it's on special teams and starting roles now. So the Brass has definitely developed a reputation of kind of finding some guys in the later rounds, but also hitting on some guys in the first round too, like Francis Bemi and Nathan Cherry as defensive linemen too. So we'll all see it come out next week in Kamloops.
Very much looking forward to it. Hey, we've got lots ahead on this episode, the final one before we do head up the Coquihalla, and a special episode next week, which we'll tease. Before we're done here, we're going to learn about the Kenya trip with our friends at World Vision and a couple of special guests coming on board. After this, we're happy to be doing episodes once a week, every week. Again, the 2024 season is here. 2006 Grey Cup champions were a dominant bunch. We're going to continue our Grey Cup deep dives by talking about a team that was, the pressure was creeping in that year, and we'll explain a bit about that. A little go for it or punt. Might have some CFL Draft flavor to that. We'll tease that a little bit. But we're going to talk with J.C. Abbott from 3 Down Nation coming up here on First and Now. And it is now our great honor to welcome to First and Now for the first time. We've been trying, you know how it is with JC and Dunk and Hodge and these 3 Down guys. You got to go through a big security screening and you got to apply. But we are thrilled to have a man who knows a thing or two about Canadian prospects, local prospects from 3 Down Nation. It is JC Abbott joining us here. And JC, it's no doubt an exciting week, and we figured what better time to finally get cleared. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. You know, there is nothing I like more in the entire world than talking about Canadian football and talking about the CFL Draft in particular. So this is my favorite week of the entire year, and I'm happy to jump on with you guys and hack it up.
Yeah, and like we were saying before we started rolling, we had multiple screens in here on draft night. Of course, TSN. We had yourself and Ben Grant, a great job there on your 3 Down podcast. We might have had the hockey game on at some point too, but you know, it's a busy time of year in sports. But before we get into the draft part, we're talking to you a couple hours after introducing Christian Covington, announcing that on Wednesday, made him available. You were on the Zoom call, and you've been writing some stories, no doubt. So just your overall thoughts on the signing and just how Christian conducted himself. You could hear the excitement in his voice.
Yeah, I was very impressed by Christian, and that's not a surprise. Obviously, I spent some time coaching at Vancouver College, his alma mater, and they speak very, very highly of him and what he was as a young man and what he turned into as a professional football player. So I was expecting that level of polish in my first interaction with him. But what impressed me the most, I think, is when you see this type of signing, your mind immediately goes, okay, it's a special season with the Grey Cup here. He's an older guy, has made his money. It's probably a one and done storybook ending type of thing. And he's very committed, it seems, to extending his career and potentially being here long term, which I think is exciting for the Lions and for the CFL as a whole. He talked about how his dad played until he was 36 and he wants to follow in those footsteps. So if you can get him at his peak, this is a difference-making type of player who can give you 3, 4, 5 productive years in the CFL as a very high-level performer on that defensive line.
And before we get into the draft talk, JC, what do you make of this defensive line now? Obviously, everyone's attention is to Matthew Betts leaving, but you know the team signed Pete Robertson. We're always banging Sione Tuihama's drum as a guy that is teetering in on 10 sacks a season, and There's Francis Bemmy in year 2, Nathan Cherry in year 3. So, but how do you make this whole defensive line breakdown now with the BC Lions?
Yeah, they've got some solid pieces, right? Obviously, the addition of Covington comes at a financial cost, and we saw that David Menard unfortunately gets released today as a result. But all of the players that they're bringing back, plus additions like Covington, and don't forget about Daniel Joseph as well, who was a high draft pick that the Lions have waited a long time to get into the building. I'm excited to see how those guys look, right? And I'm excited to see what step Francis Bemmy takes in his second year, because he was a prospect I was very excited about coming into the draft last season. Bided his time, saw some backup rotational time at defensive tackle. I always saw him more as a bit of a defensive end, but I think if he takes the year 2 jump, if you've got guys like Joseph and Covington contributing, and then you've got those notable names that we know will be reliable in Tehema and Josh Banks and Thibaut Dubai and Nathan Cherry, I think you've got the makings of a very solid defensive line that can sort of recreate Matthew Betts in the aggregate, if you will, if you want to steal the Moneyball reference.
Yeah, you're right. Bingo.
Yeah, but JC, and then obviously on Tuesday night, draft night, the team goes with George Una in the first round, 6th overall, and we'll be showcasing later that Una was the guy that we wanted to get, or our ops wanted to get in the first round. What did you make of the pick, and where do you see Una fitting into the Lions as maybe a best case scenario?
I think he's an excellent selection and a guy who can potentially challenge to start in year 1, and if not, be that 6th man right away. He is that good. He's that polished. We saw him as a first-round prospect right from the start when we at 3 Down Nation started looking at these prospect lists. He moves so smoothly at that guard position, and he's got really unique length for an interior guy, especially in the CFL draft. You often have guys 32-inch arms, maybe 33. He's got 34-inch arms, and he uses them very effectively in the running game for that Windsor offense. I think he can immediately contribute as a run blocker, and he takes pride in his pass protection. I don't think he's quite as polished there yet, but that's the area where he sees himself as being most important, is as a pass protector. A lot of linemen you talk to, as I'm sure you both know, they're like, I want to run the ball, I want to ram it down their throats. George Una wants to pass protect, which bodes very well for a team that's got Vern Adams Jr. sitting behind him.
Would you have a CFL comparable for Una then?
That's a tough one. I'm not a comps guy. If one jumps out, sometimes I'll use them, but I think it can be a little bit dicey to get into comparing guys. What I know is he's a first round caliber player in a draft that had a lot of first round caliber players, one of the deepest offensive line drafts ever, and he's near the top. So the Lions are getting somebody who I think is going to be a starter and a good player in this league for a long time.
Now, we had an idea that one of the 2 second-round picks was going to be a future pick, given the bonus selection with the most Canadian snaps. That happened to be round 2, pick 15, Theo Benedict. Now, it's no secret that the Chicago Bears are going to give this player a long look, UBC offensive lineman. I know you were at the pro day, I believe, with him and Giovanni Manu last month. But hey, nothing wrong with taking a flyer here, right?
No, I mean, it might be a little bit higher for some people's liking. Everyone's going to have different philosophies on that. But if he comes up here, and we just saw Christian Covington, you wait 9 years and you get him, Theo Benedict can have that type of impact. He's that good of a player. I was so impressed with him, both watching him at UBC, but then especially I got the chance to go down to the College Gridiron Showcase this year in Texas and watch him against NCAA competition. And when I say he was the best player at that All-Star event, bar none, and it was not even close, I am not over-exaggerating. The way this kid moves, the flexion in his ankles and in his knees and in his hips is special. He splits guys in half. His feet are so fluid. He's the type of all-star, potential Hall of Fame tackle that you can get as polished a prospect as you'll ever see if he comes up here. And the risk is that the Chicago Bears like him so much that they'll keep him around for a few seasons. But if the Lions can hit on this, it changes your entire offensive line and changes your ratio.
Yeah, and having this extra pick maybe played an influence in taking Theo that high. And with the 19th selection, tacking onto the second round, I think we switched to your guys' podcast right around the time this second round was wrapping up, and yourself and Ben Grant were talking about Ezekiel Tayade, a transfer to Concordia for his senior year. We know the breakdown of this current receiving core, JC. They're going to be probably a couple of Canadians at least in Catoy and McInnes once again starting. So this is about supplementing that group as much as anything else, correct?
Absolutely. And in supplementing it, also bringing a guy that if he's going to be your primary backup for that group can contribute on special teams. And Tiade can do that because he hasn't played receiver very long, guys. He was one of the top rated recruits in Canada. His recruiting cycle as a quarterback goes down to Boston College, plays DB and linebacker for a couple seasons, can't make the field, then goes to Toledo where he finally switches over to receiver, and then after 1 year comes to Concordia. So in terms of his pass catching ability and route running and stuff, he's still fairly fresh in that developmental curve, but has a tremendous build and body, somebody who can help you in other aspects, and really has elevated his game in the biggest moments. Like last year in the playoffs, Concordia almost knocked out Laval in overtime, and that was because Tiide went out there with, I think, 8 catches for like 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, put that Stingers team on his back in the playoffs and almost pulled off that upset. So I'm very high on him. I know the testing numbers weren't as good as some people expected, but I think the Lions are getting somebody who can contribute here.
Well, you just mentioned Laval, and usually it's not a bad idea to go pluck their players, right, with the program they have, and that's what the team does in the 4th round with Christophe Beaulieu. Again, another position where the team, they went pretty high last year with Sirman Bagayogo in the 2nd round, so another chance to add to the Canadian DBs there, right?
Yeah, he's a tremendous value at 26. He's somebody we had ranked way higher, and my colleague Ben Grant, who sat with me through that 4-hour broadcast, he had Beaulieu as his top-rated DB, even above Ben LaBrosse, who went 4th overall to the Calgary Stampeders. That's how much he likes his game, and you can see why. Nobody is as fluid in transition as Beaulieu is. Smart guy, played 2-time All-Canadian halfback for the Laval Rouge et Or, but he's going to contribute for you guys as a backup safety, right? You've got Adrian Green, who's probably going to start there. Charlie Ringland, who I was very high on last year, is coming off the injury, will be in that rotation as well. But Beaulieu is going to be a guy who's going to challenge for a roster spot, and I think has a very high ceiling down the line as somebody who can play safety or play half if you need him to.
And then, JC, the remainder of the draft, there's this Kale Dava, Terrence Gagne, Dawson Merchant. And any of those picks stand out for you? And if so, why?
Well, I love the Dava selection. He's coming off an injury. He's probably not going to be ready in time for the start of training camp. So he'll be a little bit behind the 8 ball because of that. But somebody who was productive for all 5 seasons at Tennessee Tech in the FCS. Maybe doesn't have a ton of pass rush upside, but he buries himself in there, very technically sound, is going to be somebody who can potentially be a backup piece at that defensive tackle rotation that's already got Covington and Nathan Cherry. Gagne brings you special teams value, and Dawson Marchant, again, good special teams bodied, local kid, somebody who can provide potentially depth at safety or corner where he's played a lot of the time. So solid additions across the board.
Mm. And then I guess we can bring up Theo Johnson, but maybe a better topic to bring up is that he was obviously one of the 4 Canadians who was selected in the NFL draft a week ago. That excites you though, right? Seeing Canadians, more and more Canadians get NFL looks here these days.
It does. And we've never had a higher level of Canadian football talent in this country. It's amazing to think how far we've come, even in my time following the sport closely. 4 Canadians drafted, another 4 signed to UDFA deals this year, and all the guys who got picked are legitimate NFL players who have either the capacity to step in and start right away, or will be guys who will develop into starters very soon in their NFL careers. So guys like Theo Johnson, physical freak, and somebody who stayed in Canada for his entire high school career. A lot of these guys are going to the States for prep school. He was in Windsor the whole time, was Canada's top rated recruit, goes down, has a great career at Penn State, and ends up being a 4th-round NFL draft pick.
Just use your influence. We got to get the national combine to Vancouver one of these days, right?
I would love that. I would love that. I know everyone is super excited to come out here for Grey Cup. I don't think you can have too many trips to Vancouver at all. So let's get everybody out here.
Here we go. Let's get Ambrosi.
Well, I was gonna say at least our cornhole game this year. I guess we can make an annual cornhole game at Lions Den this year with Dunk. We'll have to run it back. I remember I was on a heater that night, so
I'm not sure that Dunk wants me on his team again. So that's he was not happy with my performances when we were playing.
I kind of remember watching you guys play that. Those 16-hour shifts at Lions Den kind of get a little blurry.
Yeah.
So that's why we want to be in the game, because less time at the party and more time working, right? The best of both worlds. Before we let you go, though, I don't want you to spoil anything, because you guys, no doubt, at 3 Down are going to be doing your preseason picks, all that. We won't put you on the spot here, but just your overall sense, with this Lions team going into 2024, a lot of returnees on both sides of the ball, some key additions in free agency in various spots. How do you view this season?
Yeah, I think they're well positioned to make a run at it again, right? And there's some question marks. Obviously, Keon Hatcher isn't going to be ready to go at the start of the season. Who steps up in that role? But they've made some really intriguing signings, guys that I'm excited to watch in training camp, guys coming with major college football or NFL experience, guys in their second year who might make that leap. So this is, again, going to be one of the top 2 teams in the West Division in my mind. And hopefully, with an addition like Covington, you can overcome the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who are getting a little up there in age, let's be honest, as well, and make that run at a home Grey Cup. I'm very high on this Lions team.
There you go. Listen, this has been great insight. We have to do it more often, especially around draft time. And keep up the great work at 3 Down Nation, my friend. Just looking at it, we're doing this on May 2nd, 29 days until we'll be seeing you at BC Place for preseason. Hard to believe.
I know. It's exciting times, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. See you, JC.
We're back in the tournament capital. BC Lions Training Camp, presented by Sun Peaks Resort in the city of Kamloops, kicks off May 8th at Hillside Stadium.
Okay, boys, here we go.
Join us for the all-new BC Lions Downtown Block Party on Victoria Street, presented by BCLC, Saturday, May 18th at 3:30. A licensed zone with live music, barbecue, player autograph signings, massive bouncy castles, and other surprises. More at bclions.com. Proudly supported by Radio NL.
We're ready to go. Let's crank this thing up.
Excellent stuff with J.C. Abbott. Breaks it down just as good as anyone in this country, and that's good to see. 3 Down Nation, the source that they've become for all things Canadian football. Canadians in the NFL, U Sport, Junior, but CFL, obviously, the big bread and butter. And enjoyed talking with him, and particularly his breakdown of George Una, and how, given how pass-heavy the Lions' offense has been, with William Stanback now in the backfield, who knows how much that changes, but the pass-blocking traits are what impresses him.
Well, even JC's thoughts on Theo Benedict, he obviously said it's a risk with Theo having a NFL look right now, but JC was saying, I mean, Theo's ceiling is a all-star Hall of Fame. I think he dropped offensive lineman, and I'm like, sign me up. I'm down for that if Theo comes here and becomes a Hall of Fame tackle. But that just excites you more too, right? JC knows these guys in and out, and it's nice to have him on and get all his analysis and thoughts on the draft class and the team overall.
Yeah, and love that. Look forward to having him back at some point during this season. Before we get to George Una, we're going to go to Windsor and talk to the 6th overall pick. We've been teasing Kamloops, and what are your favorite routines here, Nikki?
My favorite thing is the routine. I think when we go to Kamloops, right? You got like we've brought up the beautiful backdrop in Kamloops. You got the mountains in the background. So if you come out to a practice at Kamloops, you have no better view, right? You're literally facing the mountains that are past the Hillside Stadium field that you look at. But I like getting out for hikes too, right? When we go to Kamloops, I know we did the one, what's it behind the mountain? It's called, it's right in front of me. The Kenna Cartwright Park.
Kenna
Cartwright Park. Yeah, we did that the other year. I'd like to do that again if you guys are down, the content team.
Why don't we lock that in for the Saturday before the veterans report?
Saturday morning hike. I'm in. I did Battle Bluffs last year. It's a little kind of outside of Kamloops, but it's a really nice view. There's like some water going on there. I did that for a sunset last year. I love that. And I know even last year when I went back with Sean White and Keenan LaFrance for our Tourism Kamloops content filming day, we went to this cafe. It was called Kikuli Cafe. It was an indigenous cafe, and we got the bannock, or they had the bannock. I got a little bite too, actually, but I got to go back there. I was looking at their menu for some of the items that they have. It's all indigenous based stuff. So you got the bannock, but they also have coffee and all that. And that's one place I'm looking forward to going back to once we go there. And we got to go to Scoops, right? I think
I'm glad you mentioned that, because my wife and daughter are going to come up for FanFest. And what we're going to do is we got a hotel right where Scoops is down there.
You got to go.
Yeah.
When you're in Kamloops, it's the best.
Promised the 4-year-old ice cream at Scoops, so that was not a hard sell. I've never been.
No way.
Never gone.
The flavors are incredible. You got all the selection, whether it's soft serve, hard. I'm more of a hard ice cream guy. But, and there's definitely way more selection.
Looking forward to that.
That too, yeah.
Yeah, and FanFest, it's revamped again, a street festival downtown Kamloops. We'll still have the Play with the Pros clinic. We'll still have the team scrimmage, I believe, at 1:30 to 3, and then it's downtown for the early evening, and our friends at BCLC are sponsoring the FanFest event. New wrinkle. I'm excited to try something new for FanFest. And I just love getting to know the team, being around football. It's all things football. We're not playing or coaching, but we're still very much feel part of the team. We're very much involved, and that's what I love.
Yeah, that scrimmage too in FanFest, at least for me, I remember last year especially, that's kind of when it feels like it's happening now, because it's the first kind of organized game event, although it's no contact or nothing, obviously, with the team going against each other. But it's the first time I get to kind of film a football game from my perspective, and that kind of is almost like a reputation, getting back into the routine of things when that goes down. And it's nice. We get to post some highlights of that too. So looking forward to that day. FanFest.
Yeah. May 18th, the May long weekend, and then weekend after that, we'll be off to Calgary for about 30 hours or so, a little preseason. Believe it's an early preseason, 2:00 local time at McMahon Stadium. And camp will break on the 29th. BCLions.com, our YouTube. We'll be doing podcasts, everything. Moj Julio will be up doing some radio shows for AM 730 Radio NL Kamloops on the Lions Audio Network. A full-on buffet of Lions football starting in about 6-7 days from now when we report to campus. One guy we're excited to see there, just one of many draft picks, one of many rookies that we're going to get to know. BC Lions first-round draft pick out of Windsor, offensive lineman George Una, coming up on First and Now. And we now head to Windsor, Ontario. It is our great pleasure to welcome in Lions first-round draft pick, 6th overall on Tuesday night, George Una to First and Now. George, congratulations again and welcome. How you doing?
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm doing really good. I'm excited to be a BC Lion. I can't wait to get into town. But yeah, it's exciting times right now.
Nick, of course, was filming when Coach Campbell and Neil called you when they were about to make that pick official. Take us through that. What goes through your mind? You've been preparing for this for a long time, but once it happens, how surreal is it?
Yeah, the amount of emotions that really go through your body is you can't even put words on it. I was watching the draft with my friends at home, and I seen BC was on the clock, and the whole process this entire senior year, I really wanted to go to BC. It was really exciting. I didn't really think they would have grabbed me in the first round, so we were watching, sitting around. And then my phone started to ring, and then I seen it said on the iPhone, Vancouver, British Columbia, and I just got so excited. I let it ring for a little bit, and then I answered it. The GM said it was him. I spoke to the head coach. And then after I hanged up, like just the feeling of being a BC Lion was so great.
What stood out to you most prior to draft night, specifically in the combine process, the interview process? No doubt you'd spoken to Neil as well as Rob Ralph. What was that like?
Yes, the process was really nice because some of the, I think it was Rob, he had came out to a few of the Windsor practices earlier in the season, and he was one of the first CFL personnel that came out to the practice. So to kind of see that experience for them to, go all that way to come see me at practice and speak to me and a couple of the other guys, that was a really nice showing. And then that kind of continued during the combine week. I think my interview with BC went the best. It was my last interview at the end of the day, last one out of the 9 teams, but it was just a really good interview. We were just chatting it up, talking about football, getting to know me. So the process leading up to it was really great. So to, be selected in the first round is just like the cherry on top.
And George, we'll take it way back here now. So when did football even become a part of your life? Like when did you start playing football, and what maybe made you want to play football?
Honestly, it's funny. I think like I was in around grade 8 or grade 7. I was at my cousin's house and we were just messing around, and he had football pads in his closet. And I asked him, like, what are these? I knew they were football pads, but I asked him about it. He told me he played for the local team in Brampton at the time. And then I went home and I just started researching the nearest Toronto football team. And at the time, it was the Metro Toronto Wildcats. So that's where I started. I think I was in grade 7, grade 8. We actually won my first year that fall year. It was an OVFL team. But that's where I started around grade 7 for the Metro Toronto Wildcats. And then I kind of just slowly continued through high school and through college and up till now, obviously.
And it was always O-line right from the get-go?
Yeah, it was always O-line from the get-go. I actually had one of my first coaches when I first walked onto the field. I registered as a linebacker. I didn't even know what positions I could really play, but I just put linebacker on the form. But after I got out there and I was on the field, I had one of the coaches. He came up to me and he just told me, he's like, George, no matter what you do, stick to O-line your entire life. You're an offensive lineman. You're going to be a great offensive lineman. And I kind of just kept that with me, and I just played O-line my entire life.
Mm-hmm. And then fast forwarding a couple of years now, I was reading this online on one of your draft profiles, but you joined the University of Windsor as a walk-on, correct? And at the time, they were a program that I think they were coming off a 1-win season. And then by the time you started there to where you ended, there was a lot of improvement in the team, right? And I'm sure yourself, your own play.
Yeah, it was a crazy turnaround on Windsor, actually. When I got there, I was a walk-on, like you said. I had a really rough senior season in terms of recruiting wise and decisions, but I got there, I walked on, and even in my first year, we still went 1-9. And then JP came around in 2019, and the biggest thing was the culture for him. He really preached. He had this model that went love, serve, and care. And that's something the players really lived and died by. And it really translated onto the field. And eventually we started getting the right guys in the locker room that kind of embraced that model as well. And as the years went by, we slowly turned it around to what it is now. So now Windsor is like a team that's expected to win those big games, expected to go all the way. So it's nice to really be a part of that process from where we were. We started in the basement, and now they're, knocking on the door type of thing. So that process was really great.
And you mentioned the culture at Windsor and that being a big part of the turnaround. I'm not sure if you're familiar with, there was a catchphrase that kind of caught on around here last season, which is literally for the culture.
For the culture.
Yeah.
Yes, I did see that. I was looking into it. So I was like, all right, if BC selects me, I'm already into culture. That's the new model for the culture.
Awesome. For fans who are maybe unaware and listening to this podcast and unaware of who you are, just maybe describe your play and what you're going to bring to this BC Lions team.
Yeah, I look to bring like a real nice, almost finesse, tenacity style to the offensive line play. I really love run blocking as well. I know a lot of the commentators and guys coming on said I'm a pass blocker. I really love pass blocking as well, but run blocking is something I really enjoy too. I really love getting into double teams, getting off to the second level, letting the running back spring forward for those extra yards. But as much as I love run blocking, I really love pass blocking too. I really love the one-on-one, being one-on-one with great defensive linemen. Before the snap, it's a mind game. He's going to pull something out of his bag. I got to do the same to kind of match it up, keep the quarterback clean. So that's kind of what kind of style I like to bring to the team.
Fast forward just 1 week from now, less than a week from now, we will all be in Kamloops on the field for the start of first-year camp. What have you heard about Kamloops? You're going to find out pretty quick. It's one of the nicest backdrops in all of pro football, not just in Canada, but the football life is pretty good. How excited are you to get to Kamloops?
I'm so excited. I have a couple of BC buddies on the team, and they just told me, like, you're going to be so culture shocked. You're going to love it so much. I've been looking at a few TikToks already, and the views is just like so breathtaking, like just off the phones alone. So I can't wait to see it in person and really fly into town and start to see the mountains and things like that. It's going to be a really exciting time. I've heard it's a really nice town, kind of like the nice suburban area of the province. And I'm just really excited to get into the town, to really see the place, the breathtaking views, and really take it in for myself. I'm so excited.
Isaac, our intern, did some pretty hardcore research here on draft night, okay?
Yeah, we're going to grill you here.
So one tidbit we have is you hate feet. What's that all about?
Wow.
We just asked Isaac to pull some research up. We had no context, and that's what he came up with.
That's some good research. I don't know. I don't like when feet touch me, or like seeing feet in the street. I'm not like a big I don't like feet type of guy, but just I don't like feet touching me, I guess to say. It's not a big like a foot thing or anything. I just don't like feet touching me.
I'm with you.
Yeah, that's good info. And Alicia Keys is one of your favorite artists, correct?
I do love Alicia Keys, absolutely, yes. She was one of the best artists, I guess, when I was growing up, when I was a kid. So hearing all those radio songs, listening to BET. So like sometimes now when I'm just in the mood, I'll listen to some throwback Alicia Keys. So yes, absolutely.
Is that like pregame music though, or are you switching that? You have to switch it up, right?
But just like, midweek, midday, chilling down, winding down in the evening type of thing. But that's the type of, if I'm going for walks, taking in the sunsets in BC and the mountains, I'll listen to some Alicia Keys.
I love that. So hypothetically though, if I don't know, Alex Hollins or Gary Peters hands you the aux pregame, what do you got going on?
If they hand me the aux pregame, I'll probably play some V's. V's is there's some Detroit rappers that are kind of like taking onto the scene. I think those guys will know them. I'll probably play some Future, maybe some Lil Durk. But I like a lot of that type of rap music type of thing. So maybe some Future, some of the Detroit rappers, Peasy, his name is, that type of thing.
I know for a fact, Keon Hatcher, Gary Peters, they're into V's, so I know they would approve. They would approve.
Perfect. That's perfect.
While we have you still for a minute or two, as far as the current group of offensive linemen, some key veterans there: Suk Chung, Michael Couture, Kent Perkins. Just to name a couple, Jarrell Broxton, of course. Have you had any interactions with them, or perhaps Coach Kelly Bates? How much are you looking forward to working with these men?
Yeah, I haven't had really any interactions with the vets yet, but Coach Kelly Bates, he was our assistant offensive line coach at the Combine. So he was sitting in on the meetings. I spoke to him a little bit. We spoke a lot in the interview as well. But I'm really looking forward to getting to learn from the vets. I think the last few years at Windsor, I've kind of been the standard. It's kind of been what George is doing type of thing. So coming in and being surrounded by a whole bunch of experienced guys, veteran guys, I'm really looking forward to, taking that back step for a little bit and just listening to them, learning from them, kind of embracing everything they have to, the years of experience they've, had in the CFL. I'm really looking forward to take that all in.
Mm-hmm. I know, obviously living in Canada too, and as you started to play football more and toward high school, was the CFL something you were watching growing up? And if so, did you have any maybe idols or anybody, or even in the NFL, if you idolized anybody growing up?
Obviously I like Trent Williams. He's someone I really enjoyed, but I think when I got to the University of Windsor, that's when I started watching the CFL, because that's when I realized, okay, if you play really good here, you can play in this league. And in my first year, Drew Desjardins, he was going out too. So that's when I started really following the CFL. And one CFL lineman that I really enjoyed is Hardrick. He played on the Blue Bombers. I think he just got traded to the Rough Riders. But I really like his style as a tackle, stand-up tackle. Really nasty guy in the run game, but also in the pass game too. He really covers guys up. So that's a CFL offensive lineman I really enjoy watching.
People have definitely made the comparison of Jamarcus Hardrick to Trent Williams in the NFL, right? They're definitely
they're similar. They're similar body type, similar play style type of thing. So yeah.
Not a bad bar to set for yourself talking about those two. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Hey, George, this has been fun. It's always great to get to know our new players, particularly the draft picks. Again, talking about the phone call, no doubt the highlight of your life, but you're also ready to work now, as you said on the phone call. So we'll look forward to meeting you in just a few short days.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity. It's a great interview. I really enjoyed chatting with you guys. And like you said, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in a couple of days as well.
Awesome. See you next week, George. Can't wait.
See you guys.
George Una, very well spoken. Looking forward to see how he fits in. And it's the highlight of any young football player's life is when he gets that draft call. And you and I we've talked, and we've talked to other people who are close to the team, around the team at practice, and it's time they draft that offensive lineman that's going to stick around for a few years, right? I mean, it's a great veteran group now, but you always have to be thinking about that next era, that next wave, and the draft is where you stock up.
It's good to hear, too, one of the first things he brought up in terms of the turnaround at the University of Windsor. The first thing that came to his mind was the culture, right? Changing. George obviously understands the importance of the culture, and definitely going to be a positive contribution to that as well, too.
He'd researched up the FTC. You have to love that.
Yeah, I got to get him a shirt.
We definitely will. So he's going to fit in. Going to fit in that regard. All right, Grey Cup, deep dive time. Only 2 of these to go, Nick. We'll get to 2011 next week in Kamloops, next week or the week after, depending on how we work it. More on our podcast schedule to come. But 2006 was a big year for the Lions. Wally Buono's 4th year since coming over from Calgary. They'd gone to the Grey Cup in 2004 and came up short against the Toronto Argos. Very, very tough loss that one was. And then you shake that off and you get to 2005, because does this ring a bell? Team was hosting it in 2005, and the Edmonton football team, as they were known as the time, the Eskimos, we can say it, they were called that at the time. Edmonton spoiled the party in the Western Final, and that took a while for the organization, I think, to collectively get over. But a big thing that happened ahead of 2006 was the Lions had a decision to make at quarterback. Dave Dickinson or Casey Printers. Casey made the decision easy for them because he signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. Had he not signed with the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm not sure what happens, to tell you the truth, but it all worked out. But this was a team with immense pressure going into the 2006 season, and boy, did they deliver.
Yeah, and you talk about, I feel like the past couple of seasons we've seen at the CFL Awards, people being like, oh, it's 2 years ago, it's just Winnipeg Blue Bombers, or last year, oh, it's just Toronto Argonauts. And yeah, they kind of cleaned up at the CFL Awards, but what were they missing? That Grey Cup championship, right? So that's when you speak about the pressure. When you have a team with Wally Buono as the coach of the year, Aaron Hunt winning Rookie of the Year, Brent Johnson, the most outstanding Canadian and defensive player, Rob Murphy, the most outstanding offensive lineman, G-Roy Simon, the most outstanding player in the CFL. So there's all that pressure. We're a couple days earlier before the Grey Cup. You have all these players getting their hardware, getting all the recognition they deserve. But yeah, on Sunday you have to go out and win the Grey Cup game. And it's ironic that it wasn't really a high scoring shootout game too, right? It was Paul McCallum being the main contribution on
Grey
offense.
Cup record 6 for 6, right? 6. I think he tied Sean Fleming's record of 6 with Edmonton in 1993. But and we'll get into it here. I get into the actual game in a minute, but talk about how much pressure was on the team. I interviewed Dave Dickinson, actually, during November 2020. Remember, no Grey Cup that year, but we kind of went down memory lane and retold some of the best stories. Of course, we did the big 20-year anniversary with the 2000 team going on our Wall of Fame now this year. Of course, we talked about that in the previous episode, but I talked to Dave Dickinson about 06, and he didn't really mince words. He said something to the effect of, it was more relief than jubilation. And he basically said, looking around that locker room that year is, guys are getting older. Guys are, maybe not eager is the right word, but guys understanding how many times are we going to go through this grind and not get it done. They had to get it done. And it wasn't an oil painting by any means. We talked about just the one offensive touchdown. Buck Pierce on the field for it, in fact, was a pitch to Ian Smart in the second quarter. A lot of impressive drives. I think the Lions marched right down the field after forcing a Montreal 2-and-out to start. And I think Dickinson hit 4 or 5 different receivers on the opening drive, but had to settle for a field goal and almost cost him in the end. It was a 25-14 win. But for me, Nick, the offensive line was big here. We're talking about the importance of developing and drafting linemen, but Rob Murphy, Jason Jimenez, the 2 tackles, just 2 studs up front, creating those running holes for Joe Smith or Ian Smart, whoever was out there, giving Dave and Buck Pierce time. Angus Reid was in the middle, of course. That's just 3 of them, but that offensive line and winning the big battles in the trenches stop us for using a cliche that's used in football, but that was the difference for me because Montreal had some pretty good studs on both sides.
Well, some of the coaches that we have right now getting in the mix too, right? Kelly Bates, the left guard, he's getting a lot of TV time in that game. A lot of there was one big run where he has a pull block too, and he's separating that for Dave Dickinson, and Ryan Phillips making a couple plays at the end of the game too, getting some action on the field. But it was also a Grey Cup game where the net yards were 134-13 for the Lions after the first quarter. So they came out on fire. It ended up in only 3 field goals, unfortunately, which is kind of what kept the Alouettes in that game. But
yeah,
Anthony Calvillo's offense didn't really have much going on all game too. Brent Johnson was definitely a problem. Corey Banks, all-star that season for the CFL, obviously a great Lions defensive back in the 2000s. I thought he had a great game too. He had a sack. He had a knockdown at the line of scrimmage. Also great coverage on Ben Cahoon, who was Montreal's clear top weapon in that game. And then the goal line stand in the fourth quarter. Javi Glatt
jumping over, yeah.
And not even the goal line stand, but a goal line stand where it results in a fumble. The Lions recover. They were really, I remember when I was watching the game, Walby and Mark Lee were very unsure if that was a fumble, and they were kind of telling Montreal they should probably challenge this one. And it was a fumble.
I
got it right.
I was going to say I'll plead the fifth, but that's just admitting that, Montreal had their chances to make it interesting. Again, that's a product of the Lions not finishing enough drives with touchdowns. And just to further explain your point, this was a day where you had to challenge those. Not every potential turnover or potential scoring play was automatically reviewed. So, but just watching this, you forget Chris Jones was Montreal's defensive coordinator.
Mike Benavides is out there as special teams coordinator for the Lions. Jacques Chapdelaine, Dave Ritchie.
Yeah, Dave Ritchie, the late great Dave Ritchie. And when we lost Mr. Ritchie a few weeks ago, going through the old bios, I'm like, you forget he came back as defensive coordinator and coached a young Ryan Phillips, coached a young Dante Marsh. I think Corey Banks was in his first year here. You have his notes there: a knockdown, a sack. The Ottawa Renegades folded at the start of this year, and there was a dispersal draft for their players. The Lions' pick in that draft was Corey Banks,
and the rest is history.
So, Ottawa losing a franchise was bad for the league, but every team got to pick a player, and I think it paid off for the Lions.
Yep, and then some other takeaways. You mentioned Buck Pierce being on the field for the lone Lions touchdown. He was used a bunch in that game as a gadget quarterback, kind of. Buck Pierce also had 1,700 passing yards that season too, right? Filling in for Dave Dickinson at times, who had 3,000 passing yards as a starting quarterback. And then one takeaway I had too, that touchdown drive, for the Lions, it's a 2-play touchdown drive. They start the drive in Montreal territory because Paul McCallum has a coffin corner punt that leads the Alouettes to go 2-0 right after that too. So McCallum was not only doing it with his leg on the field goal kicking duties, but also on the punting duties where he made life difficult for Anthony Calvillo's offense. And Chris Jones had a handful too with Giroy was kind of quieter in that game too. As Paris Jackson, I thought, had a couple of big catches early on too. So you got to have multiple weapons to win a Grey Cup.
Yeah, and again, I noticed right from the get-go, again, Montreal gets the ball, goes 2-and-out. First play of the game, Anthony Calvillo airs one out. They were trying to attack that secondary. I think it was O'Neal Wilson was the receiver, and LeVar Glover was another great one in the secondary for a couple of years. So,
Carl Kidd.
Yeah, Carl Kidd, everyone. A couple of notes for me. I like to point out some of the intricacies on the broadcast. Remember for 2000, I was kind of gushing that they were introducing the virtual yellow first down marker. It's a staple of watching football. In this one, Mark Lee says, proudly presenting the 96th Grey Cup?
94th.
94th?
Yeah.
You're right. Proudly presenting the 94th Grey Cup in high definition.
Whoa.
Remember when high definition was rare? Remember that?
I was growing up when that was becoming a thing. So to answer your question, yes.
You probably don't remember it.
No, yes. My answer is yes.
Yeah.
But I was growing up.
I think it was 05 was the first one available in high def. So it was still pretty much a novelty in 2006. Of course, we can't bring this up. He's a friend of ours. We can bug him. Kelly Bates. He got the blame for the cup breaking.
Yeah.
I think it was someone handed it to him and it was about to break. He wasn't the one that broke it. So it's just kind of funny seeing the celebrations where someone's holding the actual cup and the base of the trophy is a separate thing. So, yeah.
There's always the clip that goes viral from that game is the Otis Floyd and Avon Coburn pregame kind of like mic'd up session where they're yelling at each other. But there's also right toward the end of the game, kind of when the game's at a reach and the cameras are showing the sideline, there's a camera right on the sideline and it's right in Kelly Bates' face. And you can hear Kelly say, he's like, what? Why me? And like, it's, what Kelly says there. He's like, what? And he's like, you guys love me that much? And then it cuts away. But it's another funny mic'd up soundbite that came from that game. But
yeah, love it. Hey, one of the best Lions teams ever. I know we talked about 85 and that's probably still the best one for me. 94 was special in its own right, the whole Canada US thing, but 2006 definitely up there. And the players and coaches will agree that's an era that should have produced at least one more Grey Cup, but maybe that makes 2006 special.
Yep. Shout out Giro Simon, 1,856 receiving yards.
Unreal. Unreal. MOP, like you said. And it's a tribute to, he would have been here before Wally, but Wally and to an extent Roy Shivers was around at this time. They brought in some good players, particularly the U.S. scouting, which we've talked about as a major pillar to your roster. All right, we look forward to recapping 2011 coming up here on a very near future episode. Before we are out of here, though, it's go for it or punt time. What are you going for, Nikki?
I'm giving our friends at Tim Hortons some free love here because I've been hitting up. I'm always like there's a Tim's on King George that I always like to go to before. Sometimes I like to. Usually my cheat order is kind of like a 10-pack of the birthday cake Timbits.
There is a Tim Hortons on the TRU campus. Have you been to that one yet? I'll show you.
I'm always in the buffet in the morning. You know where to find me. But my go for it this week is the caramelized onion Parmesan pinwheel. So they have these two new pinwheel things. They're like these like savory pastries, and they are good. They are very good. That's been my new order. I got one today this morning before I came in with my coffee. They're $2.99 for a pinwheel. They're nice and filling for a little breakfast meal. And I can't get enough of these things. It's what I'm into right now, and it's a really good breakfast treat right now.
Driving up to Whistler this weekend, may have to stop and get one of those.
There's no one in front of me too from Tim Hortons holding a gun up to me to make me say this. I'm saying this because I really enjoy these.
Well, Tim Hortons pizza now, right? That looks
the flatbread. Yeah, we got the flatbreads going too.
Have to try some of that. Okay, what am I going for? Hey, we hit on it earlier, and it's a staple in training camp. It's ice cream. We talked about Scoops, that place I've yet to try down by Riverside Park, but it's always part of the spread in the meals, usually the dinners. You get a little ice cream, and it's usually a lineup for the ice cream guys scooping up with the giant scooper, and
it's usually rock hard too. It's always funny.
There's another ice cream. There's another franchise chain that I do go to for the odd ice cream, and that's got to be part of it. Yeah, Can't go wrong with ice cream in training camp. That's what I'm going for.
It's always like water cooler talk when you go up there. They're like, you walk up and someone's like really digging into the ice cream, and you're like, it's hard, eh? And you're like
rock solid.
Yeah, it's good like water cooler style talk. But that's a good one. Yeah, I'm with you. We'll definitely be scooping up our ice cream, no pun intended. Punt. Let's go. You. We'll double down with you. What are you punting?
Okay. It's become a cliche every year. I know you're going to talk about cliches.
Oh.
We get it. The Simpsons once referenced the CFL Draft.
It's kind of like the unofficial start to it, though.
Come on. It's not 1993.
Well, next May 1st or whatever, we got to at you. So everybody at Matt Baker with
Fine,
Bake
fair.
Steaks 84 with the Simpsons photo.
Some outlet somewhere will tweet a picture of the Simpsons CFL Draft, and it's like...
It's the unofficial start.
Let's move on, people. Let's move on.
Yeah, it's had its day. It's had its day.
That's it. I won't say anything more.
My punt is, there's a lot of this going around right now, I find, and this is a little pet peeve of mine, more extending into it, is when people kind of make these like generic comments about stuff that's like very maybe stereotypical. And the big one that's going on right now with these Stanley Cup playoffs is every night you see, oh, Vancouver's crowd is electric. And then the next game you go to, Winnipeg, oh, the best crowd, the whiteout. Then you go to Carolina, this place is rocking, it's the best crowd, it's electric. I think it gets used way too, people throw it out there way too easily, because every single crowd in the playoffs is loud. So people making these generic comments.
Especially in Canada, right?
Well, Carolina, Vegas, the Islanders, when they have their home games, I find are pretty crazy. Like every crowd is loud. It's
Madison Square Garden,
especially this time of year. Yeah. Some crowds are different. Yeah, when you go, when you go to a BC Place for the playoff game, or you go to Regina for Labor Day, yeah, those are a little different than maybe your week 1 game. But I
will say this about the crowds here in Vancouver. It was a lot louder than previous playoffs. Like if you go back to previous playoff series here, 2015.
You think so?
Yeah, okay. It's just part of that is because it hasn't been here in 9 years, right? And a lot of these it was a young crowd, I noticed when we went. So maybe a younger, louder, more vibrant. Now, if they make the playoffs for 3 or 4 straight years, it might tail off again. Who knows? But yeah, it's like that country concert you went to a couple of weeks ago. One of those artists probably said, "Oh, Vancouver, our favorite city."
Yep, that's a great example.
Do you say that in every city you perform?
They do. It's a great example. Timberlake was kind of switching his words up to say Van City for some of his songs. So that's a great example. Yeah. But yeah, the point is every building is loud. Every fan base is very strong. It gets kind of used a little loosely. And I think on the flip side too, when they're like, "Oh, these fans are nasty. Like they're the worst." Like every fan base has bad eggs. It's kind of like more of a societal thing rather than a fan base thing, in my opinion. So, even talking about game 1, I was wearing my Nashville Predators jersey, right? And there was people shaking my hand and telling they respect me, and it was a good game, obviously, afterwards. And there's obviously the bad eggs that are yelling some crude comments afterwards. But I mean, I think that's more of a societal thing. But people will say, "Oh, these fans are the worst because they do this." No, it's people, not the fans' bases.
Yeah, and if you're a fan, if you're going into the rival's home venue, you're going to think those fans are the worst, right? That's just a natural thing. But
yeah,
that's a good one. I like that.
It bothers me. It's a pet peeve when people say these generic things that are applied to whatever. But
can't wait to be back at Save On Foods Field for the best fans in the CFL. There you go. We mean it, though.
Yeah, every fan base is good is my point. Not every fan base sucks. That's the opposite.
All right. Before we're out of here, promote Amar Doman, Lions owner, appearing on the CFL's Waggle podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, cfl.ca. Amar talking Asian History Month, as well as what will be a big year for BC Lions football in 2024. As mentioned, catch Christian Covington at our YouTube channel, bclions.com. We've got Rick and Neil. See, we've been talking for over an hour here. The 2 co-GMs talking about Christian and the draft. And next time we do this, we'll be in Kamloops planning a special World Vision episode with Bo Lacumbo and George Chaika among the guests, talking about their special trip to Kenya. So we look forward to doing that next week.
Yeah, and we've been going through all the footage that they had too, and that'll be on the way as well. Some actual video recaps of their trip too. So a lot to come there.
First and now, be sure to subscribe, rate, leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll talk to you from Kamloops. Adios.